maybe one or two stories, and if time allows, to get a bit of feedback, and hopefully we should inspire one another. It's not a one-way street. Torah is definitely not like that. It's Torah Chaim. Torah is alive. We speak it out, especially Torah Sheba'al Peh. We speak out our ideas, we learn one from another, and please God, we should all benefit from this. The second opening, I'd like to thank my wife. On the way here, she told a funny joke in the name of her father. Relay it over. I'll say it in his name, but I won't be offended if you keep looking at your watches as the time goes by, but it will worry me if you start doing this. Although that's the time to stop. Okay. Been given around 45 minutes or so, give or take, see how it goes. And feel free if there's questions along the way. I'm more than open, and like I said, it stimulates. Something that fascinated me now, we move through life with our eyes open, hopefully looking for opportunities to grow, and also for messages from Hashem, where Hashem guides our lives ultimately. He puts us in scenarios, He puts us in front of people, we interact with different people so that we can grow. And I remember seeing something when I was young that said there's no such thing as a coincidence. What a coincidence is a miracle where God wished to remain so-called anonymous. All these things that happen in our lives are coordinated. There's divine coordination in everything. And I'm blown away. Mike, you opened up to the Chumash that I brought along from home to one page after where I put a marker. And you quoted from there. That's amazing. There's obviously something funny going on, but we'll get to where I put a marker shortly. No such thing as a coincidence. The topic that I chose to speak about, also, it's no coincidence. Mike asked months ago, already 2 months ago, when it would work out. We thought a different date, I don't know, or more than a month ago, that we thought this would happen. And the topic I gave then was spiritual navigation. It's a topic that appeals to me. Hopefully you'll see why shortly. And it just happened. Things got moved around. Who knows by who? We know. But the point that I'm going to touch on falls out in the parasha we just read. Not in the parasha from a month ago or even a few weeks ago. It's meant to be now. And I don't know, just to keep our eyes open to appreciate these moments and say thank you for them. It's another way to connect to Hashem, especially when you notice these things happening. Stop for a moment. Say thank you to Hashem for being so involved in guiding us and leading us through. Something that appealed to me very, very much as a concept a long time ago was how Hashem has allowed things to progress through the generations to the advancements in technology that we have now that facilitate our understanding of spiritual concepts that may have been understood in previous generations without the need for the parallels or the physical examples that we have in our current day. With regards to navigation, I'm going to give a few examples of how terrestrial navigation has developed over the years, and hopefully just now parallel that to the spiritual navigation, which is the topic I chose to speak about. In years gone by, well, way back when, there were two primary lights that they used. We know human beings are drawn to light. Hashem made it in that way. There's no coincidence straight away that Torah is often referred to as light. We're drawn to that light. The second we start learning it, it opens up our eyes. Eyes is what absorbs light. We want more. That the lights that were used for navigation were the sun, obviously, in the day, the biggest, brightest thing that we get to see in our daily existence. So if you knew that the sun rose in the east and that it set in the west, you were able to move around a little bit and get back to where you started. That's also an important part of being alive. At night, if people did want to move around, it was less common, but they still could move around. The light was a lot weaker. The lights that they had were also dynamic. They weren't as set as the sun was in its path. They had the stars, and they could navigate by the stars. I'm sure people in the southern hemisphere have heard of the Southern Cross. In the northern hemisphere, there's the Northern Lights, and that's different, sorry. There's a northern constellation that points to where north is. Northern Lights is another phenomenon somewhere else. And you could navigate by use of the stars. The people in those generations were pretty natural at it. They could work their way around. They also didn't have means to travel very far or fast. Anywhere they went was by foot or by animal at the most. As time moved on and people started, through the Renaissance period, building faster modes of transport with ships that could travel further and away from land. There wasn't any land-based navigation aids anymore, no mountains, rivers, streams. Nowadays we have roads and railways and all other things to help as well. They were out in the ocean. The stars and the sun were the only things that they had, but they'd need to develop tools to be able to use those elements more accurately. There's a tool that I started learning how to use on an old airplane I used to fly. This tool's called the sextant. It measures basically the angle between celestial body, as they call it, either the sun or the stars and the horizon. You also need a stopwatch and ideally a compass as well. That helps a lot. Just by the way, I flew an airplane from the 1940s. It's called the DC-4. They used to cross the Atlantic with these airplanes. And out over the Atlantic on a 10-12 hour flight in these airplanes, there was nothing to help guide you. You could take a piece of blue paper and that would be your map for 11 and a half out of the 12 hours. There was nothing else to judge by. So what they had in the roof of the plane was a dome called the Astrodome, where the navigator would climb up every half an hour or so on a stool and stand with his sextant in this old rumbling aeroplane and try and get a sighting. Hopefully they'd be above the clouds so he could get, otherwise he'd have to wait till the sky cleared or fly in a different area. And they'd spot the moon and he'd spot the horizon and get a heading and start the stopwatch. And he'd have to scramble down from his sighting, go sit at his navigation table, now facing sideways in this old rumbling machine with a very weak light and a map and a chart and a big thick book called an almanac with all references. And the navigator's job was to take the information that he'd gathered, do the calculations, and then if he was good, after about 20 minutes, he'd get a result, which would be where they were 20 minutes ago. And then so that's how they'd navigate the rest of the way across the ocean until they made, I don't know, close to landfall, wherever it was, if it was a flight from England to the US, or they'd make landfall near Goose Bay, I think, near Canada or in Canada, where they'd have ground beacons again that would send out radio signals, and there were different tools for that, and they'd need to learn how to use those. We're already on the next phase now with these radio beacons. Those things also developed as things progressed with technology. There's ground stations still in use today that emit signals, and within the aeroplane there's certain instruments that can home in on those instruments. They started off very basic, where there was a needle on an instrument that would pick up the signal, and sometimes due to anomalies in the atmosphere you could get false signals, and sometimes very fascinating things for those who are interested. You could even get a thing where the signal was broadcast even thousands of miles away. It would go up into the ionosphere and bounce back. You get a thing called the skywave return. We won't go into it obviously, but the plane could get a signal that was the wrong signal, but the instrument would pick it up as if it was a strong signal close by, and the people on board, the navigator especially, would need to know how to identify the difference. So they'd broadcast, it's called Morse code, with the signal, and they'd need to learn Morse code and to identify what that beacon was and to know that they're listening to the right station. Also very important. That's already touching on when I learned to fly. We already had to use these things, and that wasn't that long ago. Once they were certain they had the right beacon, they could home in on that. Later generations of these instruments were able to give them headings to fly, not just a needle which would point, and they could correct for wind, and it got more advanced. Until we get to more of the modern age where they made things for instrument landings with very accurate signals, very reliable. They can guide airplanes right down to the ground. They can actually land off these things fully automatic, all on autopilot. It's that reliable. Anyone who's landed in heavy fog's probably been in a landing like that. And they're trustworthy, there's backups, and the accuracy of the navigation has gone from someone who was a pro being plus minus 20 minutes accurate, flying at 400-500 kilometers an hour, to now being centimeter accurate almost. That brings us safely to our runway, to our destination. We pretty much know where we are exactly all the time. The latest generation of navigation equipment, which you'll see shortly, is very relevant to our generation of spiritual guidance and navigation, is the GPS. We all know it. It's not that new, but it's around and it's very common. Whoever's got a cell phone with GPS knows what it is. All cars have it. When they came out, a GPS used to be a box about, 3 feet by 3 feet with fancy power supplies, super fancy antennas to pick up these weak signals from the satellites. And even then, it was a big computer running this thing to spit out coordinates. That's all it could do. It could tell you relative to the satellites, not even relative to the ground, which is another story, that you are situated at north 32, this, and east whatever it is, and that's where you are. You still needed someone to interpret this, to translate that information, put it on a map, and then by using a map, work out where you want to go, what heading, and where the coordinate that you want it to be in, and whatever, calculations. Nowadays, the computers do this all for us, and it's available to everyone very easily. One of the anomalies with the current navigation systems that we use, I'll go into this in slightly more depth because it's more relevant, is that the signal that the GPS satellites transmit is a very weak radio signal. In the instruments of old, you could pick up signals from miles and miles away, and they'd be accurate, pretty accurate, and it's a strong signal. They'd have generators and backup generators to broadcast these things, sometimes in many kilowatts, so that the signal would reach its destination or its target. Nowadays, with GPSs, the GPSs, as far as I know, up in orbit, they've got batteries on board and solar power. That's what keeps them going for a long time. And the signal that they emit is very, very weak, and you need a good receiver to pick it up. But as we all know, you take a GPS under a roof, no signal. I had an opportunity to work with very high precision GPS at one stage, and trees were even a problem. To get the high precision, you go stand under a tree, doesn't work. Sometimes even in a valley, the signal bounces off the mountains. You need quite a wide range of coverage to get accurate signal. So it's got its weaknesses, but it is all over. That's one of the main points that I'd like to drive home, is how available it is to everyone. How does this apply in our spiritual space? In years gone by, especially when our nation started, even before, we know that the sun and the moon were quite popular in the olden days, and we know that there used to be stargazers as well. They didn't only look to the celestial bodies for navigation in the physical term, moving around on the earth. They also looked up to the stars for guidance in their spiritual space. There were fortune tellers and stargazers, and we know one of the things that we learned about the Jewish nation is that we're not bound by the mazalos, by the signs in the stars. We can change things. We saw that with Abram and Sarah, that their names were changed. One of the techniques they used to use looking in the stars was with a person's name, and they'd know what to look for. I have no clue how this works, but they changed the names, and it also changes their muzzle, so to speak, and we're above the mazalos. That we can, the world we live in isn't limited by these things. When the Jewish nation had their leaders, it started off with probably the strongest, the most well-known leader of the nation at its founding. We had Moshe Rabbeinu. He was as bright as the sun for us. Even his face had a glow. And everyone knew where to look. You were guided very clearly by this very strong light. And it was simple, black and white. You knew where to go. There wasn't multiple opinions. That's how it was. It was yes or no. That's the way you face. As we went down from Moshe, down through the generations, Moshe, we know, we go through Pirkei Avos at the beginning, and we learn how the Torah was passed down. And one of the things we notice is the dilution. You no longer have one bright light. You still have the single Torah. Obviously, that's never going to change. And even nowadays, using modern navigation tools or GPS or whatever it is, we still have the sun. It's still there. It never disappears. And it's still the primary source. And I can tell even in some of the programs, they reference the sun. Sometimes you have someone standing outside with a GPS and they tell him face north. That knows where he is, but he needs to move now. So it will tell him face north. He doesn't know where north is. Not everyone's orientated like that. But it will reference the sun and say to him, okay, put the sun at your back and then turn to your right 90 degrees or this or that. You can still reference it and it's still useful. So the lesson of the sun always being there is a point that we need to hold on to. The Torah got passed down, the leaders changed, and we landed up with the Sanhedrin, and after that there were Nevi'im and the Shoftim, and we progressed until after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, the Jews got scattered all over the world, and you landed up with Kehillas, each with their own leader, and you could still have your Beis Din, and you could still have your wise people of that generation, who are the lights and the guards of that time, but that original light is a bit diluted. It's not Moshe Rabbeinu. No one will ever touch that. But it's still available. We could move around, we could travel, and still have this reference to that initial light and to that initial guidance. And as we go through, the signal got weaker. The dilution happened a lot more. Everything got a lot more spread out. Now we're spread out all over the world. And you have some kehillas with 10 people. That's the whole kehillah, sometimes even less. I remember on some of my travels in southern Africa, we'd land in a little village somewhere in a small town, and there'd be a little remnant of a Jewish community, 5-6 people even, where they had their connection still to the community rabbi that would visit once in a while. But the signal was very, very weak. What it means when the signal is very weak, even though it's still spread out and it's accessible to everyone, we need to know how to tap into it. And we need to tune our receivers that they're sensitive enough to connect to these people that are spread around us. I want to take it one step further and not say that it's only limited to the people. The tools that we have available to us in this generation are so vast. We just look at all the printed material that's available in every single language. Just one look at the Art Scroll bookshelf. It's mind-blowing. Everything's available, from Torah that was given to Moshe at Har Sinai to the latest commentaries, explained in the most brilliant, clear language that everyone can access. All it takes is someone to put in a bit of effort, to be sensitive enough to know that the stuff's available and to access it and to make something of it. So that's with regards to a background to navigation aids, the tools that are available to us both in the physical and the spiritual space, things that we all use on a day-to-day basis and that we should tap into. Now, why navigate at all? We know that we see it, I think, I'll just take from my own personal space, one of the most classic examples to see the inertia that is built into a human being comes within the teenage years. To try and move a teenager out of their bed and into the world, to become productive, to get involved, to start doing things, to get up on time, to leave the house on time, to get back on time, just to move is a big job. That's an inertia I think we've all got in us. It's inert most of the time, I hope, especially in the adult years. But it's there. We have a reluctance to move. But we learn from multiple sources, and especially now in this week's, the Achrei Mot, one of the parashas that we just read, that it tells us that et mishpatai ta'asu ve'et chukotai tishmeru lalechet bahem, that we should walk in the laws and the statutes that Hashem gives us, and the pasuk finishes off, Ani Hashem. This concept of lalechet, to walk, it's a human thing really, that we walk with a purpose, to move from place to place. The commentaries explain that connected to this idea of moving, there's also the idea not just in moving laterally, but as a Jew, as an observant Yid, that our task is to grow as well. We don't just move along on a flat plane, we want to climb as well. We want to move up the steps. In spirituality, obviously. the Kliyaka brings an amazing idea also, something that, I don't know, for me it was one of those light bulb moments. It made a lot of sense. Was when Hashem speaks, or when we learn about this concept of angels. I don't profess to know enough about it or anything about it to describe what an angel is, but I can quote what it says. An angel is known as an omed, they omdim. The word omed is to stand. They're given a certain task on one level, no steps. They get put on that level, and whatever it is as an energy, their role is to execute a certain task, and that's it. No going up, no going down. There's no Yetzer Hara involved. They do their task. They're stationary, and it's done. Human beings, on the other hand, are called mahalchim or holchim. They walk. And the idea of walking is that we can progress. Hashem puts us in this world that we can grow and we can elevate. Something an angel can't do. They don't, and for that, human beings are referenced as having a level higher than what angels can achieve, because we can grow. They have one task. We can elevate ourselves and those around us. So it was amazing for me that this tied in so beautifully to the parashas that we just read. This is the times we're living in. An interesting concept in our Yiddishkeit, I keep referencing it as well in my own space, is that we go around through the years, even though we're progressing in time, there is a certain moving forward, but when we move through the year, we revisit certain topics and certain themes, and this is definitely relevant to the times that we're in, and obviously to the parasha, that we should all keep growing, stepping up and being the movers that we are. It's also, in English, it's a common term now, to be a mover and a shaker. You want to make an impact. You want to influence and even to leave a legacy of positive change that we effected. Everything has a positive and a negative, and I'd even stretch as far as to say that even some seemingly negative or disconnected forces in the world that come up with we obviously won't get into politics, but even just if one looks around in the world in general, not even in our immediate space, the people that often want to cause a bit of balagan, the thing that they demand is change. They want change. That comes from some divine spark within. Change is a very positive thing. You just need to know how to channel it. You need to be able to navigate. You need to know where you're going. You need to be able to tap into these navigation sources to direct those energies of change, so that you don't just land up changing for the sake of change. It needs to be with a purpose and with a proper purpose. On that note, I think we heard it a lot when we moved to Israel. In the Kehillah that we're in, obviously people meant it with a totally positive drive or motivation, but maybe it was from their upbringing where they said to us, we live in Ramat Sharon, it's how do we describe it? It's a very largely secular area, very liberal, but a very, very warm community and very cultured, and people that value just good manners overall in Israel. I think it stands out. It's known for that. And they said to us when we came from South Africa, we came with this very mild manner and emphasis, I think, like most Anglos have, on manners and being a mensch, and don't make a noise, and don't hoot too much in the traffic, if at all. Definitely no waving of hands, and definitely keep your windows closed. You don't need to get out. Don't make a fuss. Don't create too much attention for yourself. That's how we moved around, and we'd say please and thank you, which seemed unnecessary in other homes, but for us it was important. And we kept getting this blessing from them as a blessing. Please don't change anything. Stay exactly who you are. For us, it's especially along these lines, it doesn't fit. What do you mean don't change who you are? We're constantly trying to grow and change. But obviously, we knew the intentions, we understand it. But people should think when they give a bracha that that's not what you say. You don't wish someone that they stay exactly as they are. Hold on to certain values, obviously, but develop them. You don't need to rest on one's laurels and say, okay, I've got to where I need to be with manners. There's always room for growth, always room to progress, and change for the good. We believe in that very, very strongly. Another thing that motivates this idea that man needs to move, that we hold him, is just look at how Hashem built us. We have eyes in the front of our head to see where we're going. We don't have eyes just to look around. That's not a common saying. Your eyes are in front so you can see where you're going. This idea that we need to be going somewhere the whole time, and the direction is forward. I can also bring examples with this from the environment that I work in. It's a nice bit of a touch, a bit more exciting in terms of concept, but hopefully it will drive the point home. As people know, aeroplanes are pretty complex pieces of machinery. They design them to be as simple and safe as possible. Simple often equals safe. But to make it like that, there has to be a lot of systems and a lot of backups to the systems. But along with that, anything mechanical leaves an opening for faults, and there needs to be systems in place to deal with those faults. So it can be a very simple fault that a warning light doesn't work anymore, and you need procedures how to deal with it. Procedures, by the way, help us keep the whole system safe. As much as you can plan ahead for every eventuality, the better you'll be able to deal with those things because you've been there before. Experience also helps. By the way, this whole idea of experience connects us to the previous generations who are there to guide us, and to our Rabbanim that are there to guide us with their experience and the Masoret that's been passed down all the way back from Moshe Rabbeinu to us now. So having systems in place that we can draw from experience of others helps us to solve problems. I was recently every couple months we have to go off to the simulator to practice all the things that we don't ever want to see in our lives, and definitely not to practice in a real aeroplane with passengers on board. So they send us to these boxes scattered throughout the world, which are exact copies of the real thing. And they're so realistic that a young fresh pilot can go and do all of his training on that particular model of aeroplane in one of these simulators. After around 40 hours and a few months of theoretical training, but 40 hours of actually manipulating controls and playing with the systems, they can get signed out that the next time they sit in a real cockpit can be their first time in the real plane. They are legally allowed to go and fly passengers. It's that real. It's as close to one-to-one as you're going to get in the simulation world. So they send us off to these places. We get a briefing of what to expect. Part of the briefing is that there's going to be things that they don't tell you about, so that the startle factor is real. So it can be, anything can happen, but maybe it's a bird strike, a bird that goes into the engine, a big bird that the engine can't cope with, and the engine fails, and there's who knows what else goes along with that. And that needs to come as a surprise, and you've trained for it, and you need to stay calm and deal with the problem, and go through whatever checklists are required and land the plane safely. So I was in one of these scenarios not so long ago, and I had a particularly creative examiner instructor sitting behind us. At the end of the session, he was so creative, I had this image in my mind from seen in a movie I saw when I was very young. I don't know if it was The Right Stuff or one of these old movies about space where they sent a monkey up to space. The monkey had a few tasks. There were a few switches that he could manipulate. A light would go off and he'd need to move a lever. And then another light would go off on this side and he'd need to push a button. I started giggling in the session because that's what I imagined going on behind me. This examiner instructor, his arms going this and that and trying to push every single thing that was around just to cause us a bit of havoc. Anyway, what had happened, we were operating around the Alps, a takeoff out of Geneva, and there were particularly bad weather conditions, and it's so real, you actually it was snowing, and with freezing rain falling, and you actually start to feel cold. Nothing's changed here in Holland, everything's fine, but this is the level of simulation. And we line up for the takeoff, and it looks like there's a storm outside, There's strong winds, which each one of these things is a factor on its own. And the winds are buffeting the plane, and we're sitting there lined up on the runway waiting for our takeoff clearance. Even as I talk about it now, it feels like it really happened. I've never been to Geneva, but I was there. And we're ready to go. And we got our takeoff clearance, and we opened the thrust. We put the thrust levers all the way forward. You get pushed back in your seat. This box moves. It feels like you're rolling down the runway. And as we're going, we get to the decision speed, which from that speed and on, the plane goes to the air, doesn't matter what. It's safer to take off with one engine, with another one on fire, having lost the door, doesn't matter what. It's safer, it's still safer to go up and get organized in the air, do your checklist and bring the plane around for a controlled landing, as opposed to the other option is to have accelerated up to 200 miles an hour and with, I don't know, another 1,000 meters of runway left in front of you, and to try and stop this hundreds or tens of tons machine. It's safer to go up into the air. All this is running through your mind anyway. As we start to lift off, there goes the one engine. And that's what it was. It was a bird, seemingly went into the engine, starts banging and vibrating, coughing, and we start getting fire warnings because it's done damage, and there's havoc. And I was amazed with my simulator partner. There's two pilots always. It's calm. We've been trained, we've been programmed how to work. As it happens, we just call it out. We don't even have to identify the problem immediately. We just need to say, something happened on the right. That's it. Make sure the aeroplane's in control, and we carry on with our departure. We leave the airport, which was our safe space, behind, and we progress. Once we get to a safe altitude, we can start dealing with the problem and identifying exactly what's going on. And now you start filtering and seeing, okay, what's going on with your pressures and your temperatures and your vibration levels, whatever it is. We isolate the problem, we diagnose it, and we say, okay, this is what happened. We've lost an engine. We're now flying on one engine. And we'll conduct the flight according to the profile that's needed for one engine. It's different, and you adapt and you move on. And I think that lesson alone is something very important in life. We go through life with ups and downs. Sometimes things happen, they come unexpected events. And it can be that there was even a small failure, maybe even a large failure, whether it's in our physical living, I don't know, maybe someone dropped a glass in the kitchen, or who knows, worse, pushed a window out from the 10th floor of their flat. It's out, it fell, nothing to do about it, it's behind. Instead of dwelling on what just happened and getting stuck and stopping to move, which is not such a healthy thing for a human being, we need to decide, how do we move forward from this point and not get caught up in the past. Lessons to be learned from the past comes afterwards. Even in the simulator, after a 4-hour grueling session with sweat and who knows what going on, sometimes tears, we land, we put the plane away or the box away, we get out, we go over coffee, we relax, and then there's time for a debrief. That's where you can learn from the things that happened in the past. But at the time that it's happened, forward's the only way. That's the only way to deal with life. We have to keep moving forward. You hear that often. If they're related to someone from the olden days, if they fell off a horse, they tell them, you've got to get back up and get back on and start riding again. Nowadays it's more applicable to bicycles. Or if someone had an oopsie at work, it's okay, let's deal with it, keep moving forward. A bit of experience in the medical space teaches the same thing. A bit of experience with Hatzolo and first aid, they teach you that if you get to a patient and you did an assessment and started treating in a certain direction, and then you reveal something that wasn't in your initial assessment. It could be that there was a cut that was hidden by clothes or who knows what else, God forbid. You don't just stop and say, I messed up at the first point, and start regretting and getting stuck and not knowing how to react. You've got to move forward. You say, okay, you reanalyze. Bring this new element into the whole equation, reprioritize, and move on. Keep treating. You never ever stop. So to carry on in the simulator, we were climbing out of Geneva now in the clouds, freezing cold with a storm next to us, plane shaking and on one engine with reduced performance. And now the extra faults start happening. The engine got damaged. It wasn't only the engine, there was some hydraulic system, and the wheels, are they going to come out? And who knows what else. It was a bit of a mission. We navigated our way out of it with this mindset. Deal with what you have, stay calm, be ready for anything else that may develop, and plot a new course now. There's no ways you're going to continue from there. I remember we had to go down to Napoli in Italy, and part of the flight was to cross the Alps. There's no way that most aeroplanes can cross the Alps having lost an engine. It demands a lot of performance to climb that high, find your way safely. So we had to pick a new destination, and that's exactly what we did. We diverted to somewhere else in Germany, another place, Düsseldorf. I've never been there, but I've been there. And we managed to find that place. And along the way, we got reports from the tower in Düsseldorf that their navigation equipment had failed. And we needed to revert to an old style of navigation, which most people don't use anymore, but the plane still had it, they still had it, and you rely on different systems and techniques to be able to get you in. Anyway, that flight ended off well, thank God. Managed to land the plane, and we were able to find our way. The parallel to our present space is sometimes the routes are very clear, sometimes the weather's perfect. There's days, like the last few days have been here, where visibility is almost unlimited. There's an aviation term that they give to days where the visibility is so good. It's called severe clear. You get very clear, and beyond that is severe clear. Sometimes when you can see so far, it's actually a bit confusing, where there's no haze in the air pretty much at all. You can see from over Jerusalem, you can see Santa Catarina. It's a mountain in the Sinai desert. It's, I don't know, 300-400 kilometers away. You can see it sticking out. It's that clear. When the air is that clear, it's sometimes a bit disorientating. You find it hard to judge depth, especially your distance, which is depth from terrain, sometimes gets a bit confusing. They say those are the days to be careful of. It's severe clear. There's days like that when you can see forever, navigation's easy, you can just follow the Jordan River down south and then the Red Sea and you get to your destination. And there's other days where the weather is shocking, you can't see 200-300 meters ahead of you. When you're in the clouds, there's nothing to see. And you need to rely on different tools. And especially these modern tools that we have allow us to do this so accurately. And so too in our spiritual space. There's days where things are very clear. Unfortunately, Lo Aleinu, we shouldn't have to be put in these scenarios. But when one, God forbid, at a funeral, it's sometimes a time of tremendous spiritual clarity. It gives one an opportunity to realign their aiming mechanism, to decide, to think how they want their path to look at the end after 120. What do they want people to be saying about them? What kind of legacy do we want to be leaving behind? It's an opportunity. We shouldn't need Hashem to send those opportunities to awaken us to them. One can do it from the comfort of a safe space, but it gives that perspective of looking far ahead and aiming far ahead, and then we can zoom in again on our day-to-day space. Just in terms of the navigation side of things, start finishing off with this last very important point. When pilots learn to navigate, on their very first navigation lesson, it's all visual based, no instruments. Where the fanciest instrument they'll teach you to use is a watch. Everyone's familiar with that. And the second fanciest is a map. That's what you need. And then a compass. You can even do without the compass. It's possible without. What one does is one plots a course. One needs to decide first of all where they're going. And they say they're moving from point A to point B. But you generally can't see where point B is because you're too low, it's far away. So how do you know where to aim? You start off with a course using your planning. You need to have a bit of thought that's gone into this. Set the direction relative to where you were. And then the technique, I can say now that we teach, but that I was taught also, that the technique that is taught is to pick a point on the horizon where you're going to aim to. So you live in a slightly elevated area in Modi'in. From your point of reference, if you look out towards the sea or Tel Aviv, you could pick out even a single building and say that's your point, your reference point on the horizon, that's where you're going to aim to. And you'd fly from where you were, keep that on your sights, you'll get to that point, and from there, on the same line, you'll pick a new point where you couldn't see before, further on the horizon. Tel Aviv, not a good example for that. It's now the waves. But that's the general idea. And you'd move from point to point to point. In our spiritual navigation, it requires the same thing. I mentioned an idea of aiming far, but the actual practicalities of it is that you need to keep your head up. Your eyes also near the highest point on your body. It helps you to see a bit far. We can learn from that idea as well. And pick a point as far as you can see, whether it's in your physical or spiritual space, and navigate to that point. These points also, they don't always have to be physical spaces. They can be points in time, where we touched on a bit earlier. Whether it's the next Chag, we're in the middle of Sfiras HaOmer, the next Chag coming up, like the big one of the Shalosh Regalim is Shavuot. You can even pick something even closer. Next week we've got like Braun, that by that point in time, you wish to be at a certain spiritual standing. Whether it is that you've maybe finished this week's parasha by then, or that you'd like to finish one Mishnah, but by that point, where you can mark that point in time, that you've reached that point, and you can use that as the stepping stone to the next point. And I find this is a useful thing to help us keep moving along in our spiritual lives, is this idea of constant motion. The Daf Yomi is a wonderful tool, whoever's involved in that there's a daily mission to fulfill. And even if one misses out today, pick it up the next day. Carry on the next day's page even. You can catch up the previous one another time. But you can keep moving forward. There's this motion. And there's the Rambam Yomi. There's many Yomis that help us keep progressing through life in that space. That's pretty much that. I don't know if anyone wants some questions. If one wants another story, halachically, I know you put that down. Sorry, I've run a bit with the time. But if you want one or two halachic examples of what it's like in the environment that I work in, we can delve into that a little bit if one wishes.
Yeah.
Or we could leave it for leftovers. Yeah, interested? All right. So on the way, it all ties in, and it's more or less this time of year. On the way to the simulator session that I spoke about in Geneva, we normally fly as passengers on the way to these missions, but an opportunity arose to fly as an operating pilot while I was on this course to become a captain with one of the examiners to take one of these aircraft to Paris. It was my first time to Paris Charles de Gaulle, big airport, very busy space. It's an exciting flight. I was very keen to have that opportunity. And for the plane that I fly, if it's full, it's a pretty challenging flight in terms of range. The aircraft can't necessarily, when it's full, it burns more fuel. It's on the border of its capabilities. If there's weather or wind or any other challenge, it makes it very borderline, if not the wrong side of the line. And it so turned out that the flight that we were scheduled to do had quite a large passenger load relatively, and there was weather, and there were strong headwinds. It's just, that's how it comes sometimes in packages. And we were limited by the time that we were getting to our destination, which was late at night, that we couldn't use the alternate airport. Every flight that gets dispatched as a commercial flight has to have a backup plan where the plane can land. So if you're flying from New York to Tel Aviv, even if it's a wonderful summer's day, when they dispatch the plane from New York, there has to be enough fuel to come, almost do a landing in Tel Aviv, go back up, abort the landing, and then follow a set procedure, fly to an alternate airport, and then do a full approach procedure there, and land, and still have enough fuel that will last at least in half an hour. So this planning that goes in it's very, very safe, very safety orientated. Because of the hour, the regular alternate that we would have used was a different one, and we needed more fuel, and it was very marginal. Anyway, we left off, before we left off, the day that this was scheduled to depart was Shiva Sabat Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, the fast, almost a year ago. And a dilemma arose. We were scheduled to leave Israel while it was still daytime. We were going to land in France at night. We're chasing the sun, we're flying towards the setting sun, and we know that a fast comes out after dark. The question arose now when I would have to take the fast out. or when I could take the fast out. That was my, that was the angle I was looking at. It was also a semi-training flight or a test flight where I was being examined and I needed to be on my A game, so to speak. You need to be wide awake, not in a starved situation with a sugar low and a headache, trying to manage. And obviously we don't want to fly planes like that. It's totally against the rules, and no one needs to worry that you're going to get on a plane with a pilot who is self-afflicting just because he feels like it or he's been told to. It's forbidden. You're not allowed to operate machinery like that while fasting.
What about during Ramadan? Look more.
Yeah, maybe don't go east during Ramadan. So this question arose, and obviously a way to deal with this is with tefillah. Start off a few days before when it came out. Please Hashem, send a solution that's the best solution, that I should get a clear answer, and that things should work out. Please God, no one knows how. I didn't take into account everything. You come with your preconceived ideas. That's why when we daven, we should always say, like when in the Shema Koleni, we say, Ki ata shomea tefillat amcha Yisrael berachamim, because Hashem hears our tefillahs and He should respond to our tefillahs with rachamim, with mercy, because not always do we know what to daven for. I even hesitate to say almost always we don't know what to daven for. It's better to leave it to Hashem, but we can put in a good word. And part of the acknowledging of Hashem, to say, Hashem, we know you in control of everything. Ein od milvado, please, this is what I think looks good, but please answer my prayers with mercy that whatever's the best should be. Not what I think is the best, whatever is the best. And that we should be blessed to see that what Hashem did for us is the best. We're not the ones who